Hello everybody, and welcome back to Soundwave Mania 2. After a weekend of a lot of qualifiers, we are finally here. And I guess just a quick note before we do get into this. There were 66 teams that did play. So that does mean we will be proceeding into a round of 64. And we will also be eliminating only 2 teams. But with that in mind, I think now is probably a good time to head on to qualifiers results themselves. So the first 2 teams to be getting knocked out will be a Gamer Chris on solo role and Broken Key Starstar ARB. We will be moving through these a bit quickly, so bear that in mind. But coming into Scene 64 is going to be Team Daystic. And then following that right after will be Toxide. And right after will be Agiri 201 with an exceptionally high SV score. And then following that will be Sirius Gamer Alive. And then I have no idea how you pronounce this. JP first. Most of these teams kind of just being very even, with I guess a few outliers here and there, like as we see in Scene 62, and this team was 54th on stage 5. But following after is going to be Graduation Solo Player with a relatively high SV compared to the rest. And then following right after is going to be Chris 45 for R. And then following that is going to be for Funsies, is 51st on stage 1. A bit higher compared to the rest of these. And then following that is going to be the Resenders with another higher SV compared to the rest. And then following that is going to be Mean Bet with a bit of a higher C3. Right after is going to be the Maros with another higher SV compared to the rest. And then knocked out R64. Another kind of higher SV. I guess one thing to be careful of if you are in that bottom seed, I guess, and you do have to face another bottom seed, is just that SV. And then right after it's going to be Hard Stuck Irons with a bit of a higher stage 3, so potentially something to be slightly worried of if you do face them. Following that is going to be very Twitch Band at about average scores across the board. And then Licencio though, Al, with a 31st on the SV, so in that middle, potentially a team to be afraid of, depending if you do or don't practice SV. We're not into the NC RNA, another high SV with a 24th, our highest we've seen so far. So a lot to be kind of worried of if you do face them and you didn't really do well on the SV. While following that is going to be Liga, and we are moving out of the bottom seats as well, so this will be our first move out of the bottom seats. Another high SV compared to the rest. And then your Herobrine fans with a bit of a higher stage 3. And right after is the FL Manip, a little bit of a higher stage 5. And stage 6. And then right after is going to be the Ghost Gold with a fairly average ranking across the board. Pretty well rounded. And right after is going to be Fearless with a stage 2, 26. So I guess something to potentially watch over. And right after is going to be INBM. Mostly around the same. And then right after is going to be SOP Band. Another fairly well-rounded team. Bro Zoyer with a bit of a higher SP. And then right after is going to be LQ Wada. A bit of a higher stage 1, stage 2, so SP and that lower end accuracy. And then right after is going to be some random guy with a 16th on the SP. So I believe this is our highest SP seed we've seen so far. So it definitely does limit a pick or two depending on the matchup. And right after is going to be Bopatan with pretty well-rounded scores. I guess more so kind of ascending in terms of that number, but we just see 27 on that SP. And after that is going to be Skippy level 1, fairly higher stage 2. Following up is going to be Jose with a fairly high stage 6 score. And then right up is going to be Dave Skips 1 Stupid. Kind of all over the place. The SV being a bit higher compared to the rest. Right after is going to be D-Rust, I Just Need to D-Rust. With, I would say, a fairly well-rounded scores across the board. And then going on to 33 is going to be Diddy Blood with a 19th on that SV. And then moving up into, I believe our mid seeds is going to be Quals with a 13th on the SV. So slowly we're starting to see these higher SV scores. Not within that single digit, but we're slowly getting there. Into Tortoise was a 12 on the SV, so just one higher. And then right after that is going to be Tim Tam Jewel with 11, so I guess just back to back. And moving up into Malady Erratic with an 18th on stage 1 and stage 3. Moving forward into Korjak Cater with a fairly low SV score compared to the rest, but I would say a fairly well-rounded team. Moving up is going to be Holy Postland with a number 4 on stage 4. Definitely a team that you might want to be scared of, and I would say a team that is a bit underrated in terms of qualifiers. But following that is going to be Jacksaw Warriors with an 8 on stage 3, but a 61st on that SV. That SV in stage 5 definitely lowering their seeding, so another team that's just going to be really scary overall. And then moving on to 25 is going to be Napice with a 3rd on stage 5. So our first top 3. Really all over the place, but potentially they do have that advantage with that lower end Ellen. And then moving up into Chronial Zero, I would say fairly well-rounded team. Still a little bit all over the place in terms of scoring. But right after that, we do get Erie with a 7th and 6th on stage 2 and stage 3. So I guess potentially more favoring that lower end accuracy as well. And right above him is going to be Glut with a 10th on stage 3. Moving forward to Dystonia with, I believe, our first top 10 SV, getting number 6. And also number 9 on stage 3. And right above that is going to be Hoshino Is My Waifu. A little all over the place. Moving more up is going to be Homero Jinson Gaming Team. Another kind of team similar. And right above that is going to be SMC with a 6 on stage 5. On top of that is going to be Kudu Yes with an 8th on that SV. So another team to potentially be worried about when it comes to SV. Above that is going to be Kahama with a fourth on stage 5 and stage 6, and I believe this is where we cut off into our top seeds. A fairly good player, although the Rice scores do seem a lot higher. But potentially another player that might be scarier than they seem. And above that is going to be Nuclear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 Shock and Fire with a third on the SV. That SV is definitely helping them a lot compared to these other ones. But above that is going to be Bronya with a 6 on stage 7 and fairly decent scores across the board. That SV definitely lowered them a little bit. On top of that is going to be Existential Crisis, 9th on that SV, also being a little bit all over the place. And on top of that is going to be Alpha Directive with a 2nd on that SV and that LM coordination. So definitely a team to also be worried about. Those Rice scores definitely being a lot higher than you would expect, but still a fairly scary team. And above that is going to be What the Hell Oriente with a 43rd on the SV, 3rd, 1st, and 2nd on the Rice picks. So definitely a Rice heavy team. But above that is going to be Fake South Koreans with a 57th on the SV, 1st on stage 2, and 3rd on that stage 7th. A little lacking in the SV and the LMs. But above that will be ZZZ with a 9th, 7th, and 8th on the Rice picks. The other picks being a bit on the lower side for them. But right after that is going to be Yashiap with a 7th on the SV, 9th and 8th on the LNs. And as we do go on to 7th, we see the Chukai with a 4th on the SV, 7th on the first LN, and an 8th on the hybrid. And following that is going to be KJD with it, 5th on the SV, 8th on stage 2, 9th on stage 4. And right after that is going to be Ultraviolet with a 1st, 3rd, and 3rd on stage 2, 3, and 4. And then as we go up into Toilet Bound Inko Sama, 6th on stage 2, 7th, 8th, 5th, course on stage 4, 5, 6, and 7. And moving up into MC Yearning with a 2nd, 1st, 2nd, and 1st on stage 3, 4, 6, and 7. And then moving on to C2 is going to be Na with a 1st on stage 1 and 3rd on stage 6. And then for our C1 it is going to be Amazon.com with a 1st on LNs and 2nd on the hybrids. But that does conclude our qualifier results. And with that, we can move on to our showcase for the round of 64, which is going to be a fairly short pool, but it is also going to be fairly easy. And moving on to Rice 1, it is going to be The Words I Never Said in drum and bass on 1.05. This is a pick that might be familiar to some people. So this will be our single stream speed pick that most people might be familiar with. This is a Joule file, so some people might have an idea of how Joule does chart speed, and you will see some trills, some mini jacks in between. So it's definitely not one of those simple speed picks where you can kind of just go breeze your way through. It's definitely going to take a little bit of practice and precision and just a little bit of control. You do get some jump stream sections in between, but this is, I would say, a fairly short I guess not as simple as many other speed picks, but I wouldn't say it is the trickiest that could be here, especially as we are in round of 64. We are going to continue seeing these trills and mini jacks, which might be a struggle for some players, but overall the speed of this shouldn't be too bad for most of the people. But that will conclude our first pick, our speed pick, Rice 1, and moving on to Rice 2 is going to be your jump string hamstring pick. It is going to be What's Up on base rate. It is going to be up by mid guy. This clocks in at about 169. So you're definitely gonna want to be very careful when going into a pick like this, as it is extremely slow and extremely dense. This could kind of be that bait pick that you might choose more so because you feel overconfident in your ability to play these types of patterns. But the trickiness that will come of this pick will be, as mentioned earlier, it is fairly dense, but it is also very slow, which most players might not be too comfortable with playing slow hamstring. And you do get a little bit of kind of intermission in between, so it shouldn't be too stamina draining. And it is basically like this for the entirety of the pick. But as we do continue, another break kind of coming in between. I would say this might be a pick that some players avoid. I think something like Rice 1 might be more friendly, especially to those who are more comfortable with the harder end of things. Just because a pick like this isn't really too typical, especially in a tournament setting. Not only just the kind of density of it, but as we are in round of 64, things are going to be a lot easier compared to everything else, so it's definitely going to be a bit of a tricky round for some players, and potentially a round where we could see some upsets just because of these types of files. But moving on to Rice 3, it is going to be your technical pick. It is going to be Satellite on 1.05. Now, as we are in the earlier rounds of this tournament, you aren't going to be really seeing your typical technical pick where you see a lot of kind of abrasive mini jack patterns. It's going to be more so kind of reliant on the fact that it's more so changing in snaps. But you do get a bit of a break into the build-up here, which doesn't really use too many snap changes, but you will see some mini jacks here, which could potentially trip you up in terms of accuracy. But as we go into this main section here, you're going to be getting these 1/4 jump strings with mini jacks kind of alongside some of these jumps, but you will also be seeing some 1/5 dumps alongside. So you are going to have to kind of be able to read these types of patterns and be able to concentrate on these things happening all at once, especially for a fairly easy pool, I would say. And I would say this pick is somewhat non-stop. You don't really get as many breaks as maybe something like Rice 2. I mean, I guess you could kind of consider this a bit of a break. especially as we do get into this part. But as we do exit, we come back into the section that you will be previously familiar with, more so just this 1/4 jump stream along with these 1/5 dumps. So it isn't too much of a speed change, but it's a speed change where if you aren't paying attention enough, you could easily trip you off. But as we do conclude, we'll be going into our next pick. Will be race 4. This will be, I believe, your mixed pick. Let me just double check. Yeah, so this will be your mixed pick. But this will, I guess, seemingly consist of jump stream, up throws, and a little bit of jabs, even though they are quite slow. And of course, you do get a little bit of these stomps, which aren't too bad. Some bursts as well to go alongside it. More so, kind of the same thing going for a while. It's not too lengthy as well. And then going back into release burst. So more of these slow jabs in between. And a little bit of the break section right here, but you do get these long jabs and these bursts of the jump as well. It's, I guess you could say, a little similar to some of these other picks in pieces, but it isn't as straightforward or simple as these other picks, so you do get a little bit of variety as well. It's actually a pick that I feel could be a little bit popular, as I guess you could say in a way it isn't as risky as some of these other straightforward picks. But moving on to LN1, your coordination pick is going to be Abyss Colored Art. So this will be on the slower side by a lot, but that does not mean that this pick is going to be inherently easy, especially with the fact that it is an LN pick. And it's mostly kind of just these 2 notes at a time while releasing one. You do see some extra hold here and there, but then we get into this section which ramps it up just a little bit, and this will probably be the section where you start to see a lot of accuracies drop. Not too jacky as well, as at times LN coordination picks can get a little bit jacky, but as said before, this is round of 64, so things are going to start very slowly. But we do get into a little bit of a density pickup in this section. And we do get 2 Ellens for a little bit, and then this section right here, which could potentially lead to some misses depending on how comfortable you are with Ellen in general, but also just these picks as well. But it is more so kind of just the same thing over and over again, with some variety in between these patterns every now and then. And also a bit a longer pick as well, clocking in at almost 3 minutes. And moving on to our density pick, Ellen 2 is going to be La. So it is going to clock in at around 160 BPM, so very slow. And going into this next section here, which is where the density picks up a little bit and you start to see more of these Ellen density patterns that you're all more so used to. I would say a little bit of, not technicality, but in a sense, some technicality, I guess, for a density pick at least. Even though it is fairly slow, it isn't one of those Ellen density picks where you can kind of just go along with it and just hope that it works out. And then moving on to this next section, you're gonna go straight back into the density section that you're all familiar with from the previous section. And as we do get into the ending, it does ramp up just a little bit, not quite too much to get these first to end you off. Moving on though to our hybrid sections, it's going to be hybrid 1 of Bluebird featuring a Chinese remix. This is going to be the more race focused hybrid. It's going to be fairly simple as well, just it being on a 64. I mean, that is the nature of these early rounds. Also, just these simple picks, not really too much to expand on, nothing too gimmicky. I would say this is probably more so an accuracy area. Potentially a pick that if you're very comfortable with accuracy, you might want to pick this one. And a little bit of a ramp up in terms of that density with some burst as well, so definitely something to be a little bit careful of when it does come to a pick like this one. A little bit of a funny release section there. But it's not completely autopilotable, but it definitely is a pick that could favor some players a little bit more. let me first off with this final section. A little bit of arm coordination, but nothing too crazy like our element coordination trick. Just, I guess, to mix things up just a little bit. And moving on to hybrid 2 is going to be out. This is supposed to be your more Allen biased hybrid. So fairly simple, kind of just like the last hybrid. I mean, it is only the start. Let's go wrap up this a little bit. But here you start to see a bit of a mix up when it comes to this pattern, so a little bit of that difficulty really starting to set in. In a way, kind of similar to how we did see things on hybrid 1 with Galen patterning getting a little bit more complex, all things considered. That will conclude Ellen hybrid 2. And moving on to our SVs, SV1, it is going to be null control. This will be your reading-based SV. And starting things off fairly simple, so things will get back up a little bit. And it is going to be fairly simple, a little bit difficult. So just mostly subtle quirks and these kind of changes in that scroll speed, but it shouldn't be too bad, all things considered, and a little bit of kind of just having to know the rhythm in general. I think for songs as simple as this one, it shouldn't be too difficult. And then moving on to this next section, which is gonna be a little bit harder in terms of hacking it. And as we do get into this ending, more so kind of just the same gimmicks that you've been seeing all along.
Don't stop till the club goes silent.
And moving on to our memorization SV, it is going to be Dying Breath by Rubis. This will be your memory pick, and starting off with this slow jam.
You live only for yourself, so just leave me on the shelf where your exes come and go.
Beginning just being a reading section, but as you progress, the gimmicks will start to show up.
So I'll gladly pass the blame, but I know it's not just you. I've done things to fuck up too.
You do start to see a little bit of a change in this area. And in this section where you'll just have to know how to play it, not really being inherently a reading thing. Like right there, you're definitely gonna have to know the rhythm a little bit, but it's not anything too crazy in terms of memorization.
Life has never been too great until you came and broke my fall. But I've seen you come and go, and I never let you grow. You saw through my foolish ways, so we took our separate ways. But I know it's not just you. I've done things to fuck up too.
And then moving back into more of these SBs. More of these gimmicks that you saw earlier, bringing that memory aspect into this. And that will conclude our SBs. And now just time for the tiebreaker. It is going to be Oz Lost Found Melody. And thankfully it is not going to be the loved one. So you won't have any issues having to memorize this. And it starts off really simple. I would say a little reminiscent of the SV version, the one that is love. We're moving on to this next section where you're going to start to see a little bit of those bursts as well as more layering behind the chart itself. Also just kind of being kind of hybrid in general, not really having too much of a bias towards US or LA. A smooth mix of both of them at the same time. And it is also a bit on the shorter side, which is a bit fair considering how small this pool is. More so kind of the same verse in between, but you also do have these elements where you do have a jack at the start and beginning, so it could be an area that gives some people trouble hacking. Into this section, focusing more on the tracks a little bit, also having a little bit of a rice vibe. Some burst in between as well. So it's definitely not those core jack sections where you can easily just autopilot the jacks. You're definitely gonna have to be careful a little bit when you come to sections. And basically limping with these jacks, but kind of having pauses in between the burst of these jacks. And then this section here, introducing the burst. So those jacks are now gone, and you get these bursts in return. And as we do start to get near the end, you do see this more Ellen Vice section kind of being almost like a mini coordination section. And as we do get into this ending, it is just going to be a repetition of this pattern. So nothing too complicated, just these elements being added as we get into the end. And that will include the pool. So good luck. Schedules are probably going to be up in a bit. You are also free to reschedule. But with that, I've been your commentator, No, and I will be signing out.